Hi, my name is Colleen Eddy, and today I'm going to be talking about coping in times of crisis. And this is part of the stress management for teachers program that was created by Dr. Herman and Dr. Renke with the University of Missouri and the Missouri Prevention Science Institute. So after this webinar at the end, I'll be sharing some resources from the website that can be a support during this tough and stressful time. So today I'm going to be talking about supports for coping when things are really tough, like right now with everything going on with COVID-19. As we go along, there will be times where I'll prompt you to answer a question or do a brief activity. So it might be helpful if you have a piece of paper so you can write a few things down as we go. Okay. So first I'm going to be talking about why this is a challenging time for coping and why times of crisis it can be especially hard to manage our stress. Everything seems like it's turned up a little bit. And so I'm going to be talking a bit about that and what some additional demands there might be right now, in addition to everything going on in our personal lives, but in our professional lives too. I'm going to be doing a brief activity with you that's a values activity, and then I'm going to be talking about some frameworks for coping and how to apply those frameworks during a challenging time like right now. Before we jump into things, I just want to do a brief self-assessment with you. We do this as part of the Teacher Stress Program because it is helpful to check in with how you're doing today, right now. So I want you to think about this question. How stressful is your life right now? What number would you pick on the scale? So 0 is not stressful at all, and 10 is very stressful. Which number would you put? Are you on the not very stressed side, kind of in the middle, or towards the higher end? I know this can change on the day-to-day, even hour to hour, but pick a number for right now. And then after you have your number, I want to ask you another question. So you have your stress, but how well are you coping with this stress right now? Would you say 0, you're not coping well at all, somewhere in the middle, or 10, that you're coping really well? So again, put yourself somewhere in this line. So think about those numbers. Think about where you are with your stress level and where you are with your coping. I know it can be hard to initially pick a number, but this can be something that can be helpful to do on a regular basis, just to do a self-check-in to see where you are with your stress and with your coping. It can be a good thing to do for yourself and also with family members too, to see how they're doing. Even just a brief check-in, giving a number to these things, and doing it a few days during the week or once a day, something like that, by itself, that can even cause some positive changes, and you might be able to start noticing if you start getting stuck in those lower numbers of not coping very well or those high stress numbers. So think about where you're at right now. And now I'm going to talk a bit about why this might be a challenging time to manage stress. So like I mentioned, things might be a little bit more intense right now, or a lot more intense right now. The dial might be turned up, and everything, even small things that might have felt easy to manage before, might seem harder now, or things that used to not bother you might be really irritating. Or you may be struggling with some really serious things. So this is a particularly tough time for mental health. And if you're having a tough time, it's not your fault. These circumstances are really hard. So there's a lot of incredible uncertainty about the future right now with COVID-19. There's grief, there's loss, there's fear. On an individual level, you might be concerned about yourself or a loved one. There's a community concern. There's an impact on the economy. There's a whole level of global trauma with everything going on. And then, in addition to everything going on with concerns about health and fear and all of that, now with all of the constraints with social distancing and the importance of staying at home, it can be more challenging to use some of those typical coping strategies that can be helpful, that have been helpful for us before. So we're losing a structure and routine, which is really protective for mental health. We're also not able to connect and see people in the same ways that we were before. And that diminished social connection can also be a hit to our mental health. So all of those things together, that increased anxiety, that increased fear and uncertainty about when things are going to end, when are things going to get better, is something going to impact someone close to me or even myself. I don't have my routine or my structure, and I'm not able to connect with people in the same way. All of that together means that it is hard for mental health, and it is even harder now to cope. So again, if you're having a hard time, that makes sense. And if you're doing well, but then find some days are harder than others, that makes sense too. So if you're struggling, I'm going to be talking about some things that might kind of reduce some of that intensity a little bit to make you feel a little bit better. But it's an important time to not blame yourself if you're struggling with these things. That judgment and shame for having a hard time right now is going to make you feel even worse. And having feelings of anxiety or frustration or even depression right now makes sense, again, because this is such a tough time. So on top of all of those personal things that we may be dealing with, there's some additional stressors that go along with teaching. So many of you may have experienced an abrupt shift to online learning and teaching, and that's a challenge. So learning to teach and manage student behaviors in an online learning environment is tough. You may also be worried about students and their access to food, what's going on with them in their home lives. School provides a lot of structure and safety for many students, and not being able to have that is challenging and something that you may be concerned about. You may also be concerned about responding to students' fears and concerns about the virus. It's tough because as adults, we're often in a position of trying to provide reassurance to children and to adolescents. And when we're unsure about things ourselves, it can be hard to be a support during these trying times. You might have your own worries about the virus and your own family as well. And then working from home, developing a new routine, how to manage time, new structures in the home, and figuring out that work-life balance in the home when you don't have the division of the school, everything is now at home. That's really tough. And then you may be taking care of your own family members, your own children, trying to homeschool them while also teaching other students. It's a lot to balance at one time. So, and this is on top of the many stressors that we know teachers already experience. It's a lot. So before I go into some models for coping, I wanted to start with this activity. This is a values activity, and this prompts you to reflect on the aspects of your life that really oftentimes are kind of below the surface, but drive a lot of our behaviors and our motivations. And these values are things that are related to being a teacher, but they can also be related to, just you as a person as well. Now can be an important time to reflect on those things that matter most to you, because they often, reflecting on values can be energizing, and it can make you feel good when you're connecting with the things that are really important to you. So what we're going to do for this activity is, if you have a piece of paper or something to take notes on, like a computer, I want you to take a look at this list of all of these values here. I know there's a lot here. I'm going to read through them. And as I'm reading through them, I want you to write down the ones that you would say are the most important to you. Now, you can't write everything down. There's a lot here, but try to pick the ones that really stand out to you as the most important values to you. And then I'll have you do something else with that list. So I'm going to read through these. The first is accepting differences in people, working hard, being organized, not giving up, being honest, being liked by everyone, being respected by others, being a good teacher, taking time for myself, being happy, being healthy, being responsible, being a leader, doing the right thing, taking care of my family, staying in control, being real or genuine, being kind, helping others, making a difference in the world, being patient, being flexible, being a lifelong learner, having fun, feeling good about myself, being aware of personal biases, relating to students, being a good listener, being a role model, having a safe classroom, being a good colleague, communicating effectively, being self-reflective, understanding others, and being fair. So hopefully you wrote down a few of those that stood out. And if there's any value that you have that wasn't on that list, feel free to also write that one down as well. So now I want you to take a look at your list of the things that are the most important to you. And I want you to narrow it down to your top 3. So I want you to pick your top 3 values. What are the most important things to you as a person? As a teacher, as a person, what are those top 3? And if we were in a group, I'd have you share with each other about those 3, and we're not in that setting right now. So if you could take a minute or 2 and write a sentence about each one, why is that important to you? Why does it mean so much to you to take care of your family, as an example? And after you reflect on each one of those, I recommend that you have a way to reflect on these values if you can over the next week. Maybe write them down on a note card and put it on the refrigerator, or start a conversation with a family member about these things. Reflecting on this, again, can be energizing and can bring you back to, what is the most important? What do you want to focus on right now with everything going on? So hopefully you found this activity, kind of neat and different. Oftentimes we kind of go through our day-to-day without thinking about these things, but they're oftentimes really there and below the surface, and they matter a lot to us. So it is important to reflect on these every so often. So that was the values activity, and hopefully you enjoyed it. Now I'm going to talk a bit about coping with stress. So that was one strategy to cope with stress, is to reflect on really what's important to you right now. Another kind of framework for thinking about stress, especially during times of crisis, is to think about this idea of primary and secondary control. So with primary control, those are situations where we have really direct control. So this is where we can have an influence and change something with what we do or what we think about, and that can change the situation. So we want to ask ourselves, what are the aspects of this situation where I have direct control? What can I do? So for example, with COVID-19, with things going on, some actual actions that we can take to take control of the situation, to keep ourselves safe and keep our family members safe, is social distancing, staying safe, and keeping up with those hand washing and all of those good practices. So those are actions that we can take that can allow us to have some direct control over this situation, being there for family and friends, checking in with loved ones, that type of thing. Secondary control, on the other hand, that's with coping with situations where we don't have direct control. We can't control the situation and the circumstances, but we can possibly adjust how we respond to those things to make ourselves feel a little bit better. So what can I do to feel better about the things that I can't control? So for example, with one example is like when it's raining outside, I can't change the fact that it's raining outside. I can't change the weather, but there may be some things that I can do to make myself feel better about the circumstances. Similarly to when a crisis is going on, we might not have direct control over that crisis. We can't, go in and get rid of all the virus right now, unless you're in that kind of profession, I guess. But maybe some things that we can do is having some of that self-compassion, giving ourselves grace during the stressful time, or maintaining a routine, things like that, to make ourselves feel a little bit better about that really tough situation. So that's kind of primary and secondary control, thinking about what are the things that I can influence and have control over, or what are the things that maybe I can do to make myself feel a little bit better about the things I can't control. So if you've participated in the stress management for teachers program before, then you might be familiar with this framework, and this is the teacher coping model. And this is a framework for based in psychology for coping with stress. And first, there's the aspect of building awareness, checking in. So at the beginning, I did that self-monitoring, rating your stress and your coping. And the cool thing about that is by itself, it can cause some positive changes. If you check in with yourself, you might start to notice some differences on how you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And that might prompt you to try some other ways to cope so that you don't get stuck and feeling down. So the first aspect is building awareness. And then I talk about adaptive thinking and adaptive behaviors. And so hopefully through building awareness of your stress, doing those check-ins on how you're doing, and increasing adaptive thinking and adaptive behaviors, that'll lead to more positive feelings. So that's a general framework for coping. But I also, with everything going on right now during a time of crisis, it can be hard to apply these things. So what I'm going to be talking about today is some adjustments, some ways to apply adaptive thinking and adaptive behaviors to hopefully lead to some more positive feelings or to feel a little bit better with everything going on. So I'm first going to talk about adaptive thinking. And adaptive thinking is the idea that our thoughts, although they happen very quickly and often we take them for granted, we can have some control about some of the things that we're thinking about and the words that go through our heads. And there may be ways to adjust our thinking to be more helpful and more helpful for us, and that can make us feel better. So some ideas for negative thinking during a time of crisis is, first, I just want to say it's tough. It's tough in general to change how you're thinking about things, but especially when there's a lot going on and there's some real, serious fears, that can be really tough. So again, kind of removing some of that judgment and blame if you are having a hard time, and giving yourself some grace with your thoughts and some, compassion, and trying to be gentle with yourself in what you're thinking about and what you're saying to yourself can be really important now. And giving yourself that compassion that you would give, another person who's struggling, maybe especially helpful right now. So for adaptive thinking, we talk a bit about reducing those negative thinking, those thinking the worst is going to happen, that type of thing. And one thing that can be really important right now is limiting kind of an excessive exposure to news and social media coverage. Now, it is important to be informed so that you can stay safe and know what's going on to protect yourself and loved ones, and that makes sense. But with news and social media, that can kind of get excessive pretty quickly, and a lot of the information that is out there can really make you feel worse, and you may not need to have a constant exposure to it, and it can make you feel worse pretty quickly. So limiting that exposure, having one or two trusted sources that you go to, but not checking every hour, not checking multiple times a day, not checking on that that social media stuff all the time too. Social media can be helpful for connecting with other people, but now could be a good time to evaluate if there's some aspects of social media that aren't really helpful for you right now, or that after you use it you don't feel very very good, and that might be a time to think about that. And this could also be a time to think about with other loved ones or kids that you have, if it would be helpful to limit some of that exposure to social media, some of that exposure to all the negative things going out there. beyond what you kind of need to know to keep yourself safe. The reason that can be helpful for reducing negative thinking is the more negative things that you see, the more likely you'll be and hear about, the more likely you'll kind of be primed to see those things more often. So reducing that can be helpful. For increasing positive thinking, it can be helpful to not only just try to reduce those negative thoughts, but then try to increase those positive thoughts and prime yourself to be noticing positive things more often, even small things that can make a difference in what you're thinking about, even, focusing on some small positive things that could be going on right now. So one thought for that is writing things down can be really helpful for changing your thoughts. And one practice that there's a lot of research to show that there are a lot of benefits of it. And you may have heard this suggestion before and been like, oh yeah, I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but it really can help. And it can help to make you more likely to notice more positive things. And that is reflecting on what you're grateful for and the small things that make you happy and bring you joy on the day-to-day basis. Noticing those things will just make your mood better, and then you'll be more likely to see those small things. So writing 1 to 3 things that you're grateful for each day, keeping a little journal. If you miss a day, that's okay. Give yourself some grace. But keeping a log of those things and trying to pick out those small moments that make you smile, that bring joy. Again, this could be something else to reflect on with loved ones, like what was the best thing that happened today? Writing that down. It can be neat to look back at those. So think about that. Is there anything that happened today that just made you smile? I think for me, one that happened a little bit ago is I have a dog and he likes to find the sunspots in the room, and he fell asleep in this one sunspot and he was using his toy as like a pillow, and I just thought that was really cute. And so writing that down and just thinking about that makes me smile. Are there small things that happened to you today that just brought that a little spark of joy? And the more that you write these things and reflect them, the more likely you'll be able to notice those moments, and that can increase positive thinking. So again, another thing to think about with adaptive thinking is you may be having some pretty negative thoughts right now and some really, valid fears about what's going on with COVID-19. And so we don't want to shy away from those thoughts. We want to address them, and we want to see if there are other ways of looking at the situation that might make us feel a little bit better. Again, this is tough, but we have a list here of some fears that you might be thinking, some thoughts that you might be thinking during this time. And we want to see if you can come up with more helpful ways of thinking, or just another way of thinking that might make you feel better. Like I mentioned, we're often, more kind with other people than we are with ourselves. And now might be a helpful time for us to try to lessen the intensity of some of those thoughts, just to make ourselves feel a little bit better. So here's a list of some negative thoughts that you might be thinking right now. I'm going to lose my job. I'm not doing enough to help my students. I'm an awful parent. I'm going to die. Someone I know and love will die. The economy is going to collapse. I can't do this. Everything is awful. It will never get better. My students are suffering and will never recover. Now, I know these are really intense, and at the same time, it's important to talk about them because they're likely things that you may be thinking, or someone else you know and care about might be thinking, and it's important to address them and not shy away from some of these thoughts, and try to think about them. So in order to try to come up with a positive replacement thought or a different way of looking at it, we want to think about what we might tell a friend if they said this to us. And if you notice that you have one of these thoughts, think about that and maybe write down what would be a good positive replacement thought. So we'll go through a couple examples, and a good positive replacement thought isn't just the opposite, because that's not going to make you feel better, but it's trying to make it a little bit more realistic, a little bit less intense, or just a way of looking at it that's going to make you feel a little bit better. So I'm going to lose my job. That's a tough thing. A positive replacement thought for that one might be that, maybe there is a chance that I could lose my job. Maybe the chance is pretty small because, there's always a need for teachers. If I did lose my job, how would I handle it? Could I handle that? What would I do? What steps would I take? Would I look at my resume? Where would I apply? And really even, I'm really thinking about this deeply because we want to take through how would we handle that? Because in reality, even if that did happen, there'd probably be ways that you would be able to handle that and adapt. I'm not doing enough to help my students. That one's tough. I always feel like we're not doing enough, not being enough to support them. But even probably all of those small things that you're doing to support students and to be there for them is really important and appreciated, and more than they would be getting without you there. And even reaching one student is a success. So trying to reframe that a little bit. These thoughts of, and same with being an awful parent. Often so hard on ourselves with parenting, but making sure that your kids are safe and they're home and they're happy. And that's a lot right now. And giving yourself some grace with those thoughts. And then thoughts about our own safety. I'm going to die, or someone I know and love is going to die. That's really hard to think about. And there is risk with this virus. And so some of these fears are valid. Maybe some ways to reframe these ones are, this is a serious situation. I'm doing the best I can to keep myself safe and keep myself healthy, and to be around those that I love and care about. So if there are any other negative thoughts that you have with everything going on, don't be afraid to kind of think them through a little bit. Think about how you might handle them, and try to see if there's another way of looking at it that's going to make you feel a little bit better. So I talked about adaptive thinking, and now I'm going to talk a bit about adaptive behaviors and some actions that you can take that can hopefully help cope in this tough, stressful situation. The first thing I'm going to mention is it can be helpful to maintain some consistency with a schedule. And this is because this isn't so that you need to stick to something really strict and rigid. You can't be expected to be doing the same types of things and the same, getting as much done as before, because it's not like you're just switching to working from home. You're working from home in the middle of a crisis. You're doing a lot. But having some consistency with a routine schedule during the week can be helpful, because when so much is out of our control, it can be helpful to have some predictability and have a routine, knowing what's going to happen next. We like having structure. So having that can be really helpful for you, but also if you have children or for your students, building some sense of routine. So that might mean, during the week, getting up at a certain time, having a routine during the morning, lunchtime. And if there's anything that you want to add into your routine that you don't, typically do, something that's related to you, I'll talk about some of the types of activities that could be good for that in a little bit, going for a walk, things like that. So having that. And something that can also be helpful is, keeping those weekends as a time for, relaxing or break or doing something that you enjoy, having one or two things that you're looking forward to doing on the weekend. So every day doesn't just feel like it's the same. The next thing with adaptive behaviors is changing and adjusting your typical activities that you enjoy, those things that really help you, cope, or just things that bring you fulfillment, and trying to do those with the current constraints as much as you can, not just giving up on some of those things. So from research in psychology, having a good balance of activities in your schedule is really protective for your mood and prevents against depression. And there are 4 categories of activities that are really good to have in your schedule and to have a good balance of. So again, it might be harder to do all of these activities right now, and that's okay. But I'm going to go through these 4 categories and think if there's anything that you might be able to add, or if there's any of these 4 areas that you feel like might be kind of lacking in right now, because those could be good things to think about trying. So the first one is being active. So moving your body, being active, that is really great for making you feel better. Oftentimes, when we're anxious, we can hold a lot of tension in our bodies, and so just moving it can be a way to release that emotion. It doesn't have to be, well, gyms are closed right now. It doesn't have to be, really intense exercise or anything like that. Even just a walk to the mailbox could make you feel a little bit better. So getting the body moving is really important. Being social. So we're social creatures, and being around other people is important. Now, some people might, have a smaller circle of friends, and some people might, like to connect with a lot of different people. Still having a way to have those connections right now, even with social distancing. Now doesn't mean you need to be isolated. So finding ways to connect and stay in touch is going to be really important for mood, so that you don't feel like you're on your own. I know that video conferencing might be tough for, it's used a lot for work, but finding ways to do that in social situations, or again, kind of having that connection is really important. The third category of activity is having goal-directed behaviors. So feeling like you are working towards something, even if you have to struggle through a bit, even if it's not, perfect, if you're learning and making progress towards a goal, that can be energizing and motivating. So having something like, an instrument, or an art project, or something that is moving in a direction towards a goal, it can be helpful. And the final category is something that's related to service. Giving back to other people feels good. And again, it might be hard to volunteer in the same ways as before with everything going on. But even small things for family members, a thank you note could be an act of service, and that could be a good way to make yourself feel better, make someone else feel good. Helping out a neighbor with yard work. Those small things are related to service. Chances are after you do something like that, you'll feel a little bit better. So think about those 4 categories, and if there's anything you want to try this week that's related to any of these, and give it a try, like an experiment, and see how you feel afterwards. So I mentioned a lot of different activities, and the final thing I want to mention is, kind of again, going back to that adaptive thinking, give yourself some grace if you're not able to do it all. You don't have to come out of this with, developing a whole new skill, or, having accomplished all of these things. That's okay if you're not able to fit everything in or get everything done right now, because, there's a lot. So that's some information about adaptive behaviors for coping in crisis. Now I'd like to do a practice with you that's related to thinking about long-term wellness and mindfulness. And I'm going to go through a mindfulness script with you. So this mindfulness is a helpful practice. Maybe something that you do, but it's a way to just kind of stay grounded in the present moment. And it's a way of thinking about things to kind of remove some of that judgment that may come up about our thoughts or how we're feeling. And the exercise I'll go through will really bring you back to your breath. And I really like that a lot because when we breathe in a slow and relaxed way, that just sends the message to the body, like, calm down, this isn't an emergency. So taking slow and gentle breaths and focusing on the breath can be a way to kind of ground yourself if you feel like your thoughts are really spiraling, or if you just feel like you need a second to calm down. So I'm going to read through the script and like you to just give it a try. So I want you to start by settling into a comfortable position, and you can allow your eyes to close or you can keep them open and have a soft gaze. And I just want you to begin by taking several long, slow, deep breaths, breathing in fully and exhaling fully. Breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, or and allow your breath to find its own natural rhythm. You don't need to change it, just kind of observe it. And bring your full attention to noticing each in-breath as it enters your nostrils and travels down your lungs and causes your belly to expand. And notice each out-breath as your belly contracts and air moves up through the lungs, back through the nostrils or mouth. And invite your full attention to flow with your breath. Notice how the inhale is different from the exhale. You may experience the air as cool as it enters your nose and warm as you exhale. As you turn more deeply inward, begin to let go of the noises around you. If you're distracted by sounds in the room, simply notice them and then bring your attention back to your breath. Simply breathe as you breathe, not striving to change anything about your breath. Don't try to control your breath in any way. Observe and accept your experience in this moment without judgment, paying attention to each inhale and exhale. If your mind wanders to thoughts, plans, or problems, simply notice your mind wandering. Watch the thought as it enters your awareness as neutrally as possible. Then practice letting go of the thought as if it were a leaf floating down a stream. In your mind, place each thought that arises on a leaf and watch as it floats out of sight down the stream. Then bring your attention back to your breath. Your breath is an anchor you can return to over and over when you become distracted by your thoughts. Notice when your mind has wandered. Observe the types of thoughts that hook or distract you. With this knowledge, you can strengthen your ability to detach from thoughts and mindfully focus your awareness back on the qualities of your breath. Practice coming home to the breath with your full attention, watching the gentle rise of your stomach on the in-breath and the relaxing, letting go on the out-breath. Allow yourself to be completely with your breath as it flows in and out. You might become distracted by pain or discomfort in the body, or twitching or itching sensations that draw your attention away from the breath. You may also notice feelings arising, perhaps sadness or happiness, frustration or contentment. Acknowledge whatever comes up, including thoughts or stories about your experience. Simply notice where your mind went without judging it, pushing it away, clinging to it, or wishing it were different. And simply refocus your mind and guide your attention back to your breath. Breathe in and breathe out. Follow the air all the way in and all the way out. Mindfully be present, moment by moment, with your breath. If your mind wanders away from your breath, just notice without judging it, be it a thought, emotion, or sensation that hooks your attention, and gently guide your awareness back to your breathing. As this practice comes to an end, slowly allow your attention to expand and notice your entire body, and then beyond your body to the room you are in. When you're ready, open your eyes and come back fully alert and awake. Breath is always with you as a refocusing tool to bring you back to the present moment. So thank you for giving that practice a try. Maybe you feel a little bit more relaxed after focusing on the breath. So this is a script. There are a lot of different ones online, and there are also some like guided YouTube videos that go through this type of thing. This could be a good thing to practice yourself, or it could also be a good thing to share with students as well. The breath is so powerful because it can just be such a good way to calm down. Okay, so I've talked about a lot of different strategies and things, and I know there's also a lot of information out there, and things, suggestions and things, and it can be overwhelming to think about trying everything and changing everything at once, especially with so much going on. So right now, I'd like to think about setting a goal for coping. It's really helpful with setting a goal to set something specific, something attainable and realistic, something we can measure. Much more likely to meet a goal if you have that information with it. So I want you to think about, I talked about a lot of different strategies, some things related to adaptive thinking, reducing negative thinking, increasing positive thinking with a gratitude journal. I talked about addressing some of those negative thoughts and trying to come up with a positive replacement thought. I talked about increasing some adaptive behaviors, and then I gave you an example of a mindfulness activity. So think about all of those things and maybe pick one or even two that you might want to try this week. Think about what your goal would be. Would it be to try every day, 5 minutes a day? Try it by yourself, with a family member? Where will you try it? That kind of thing. Really try to make it specific and write down what your goal is this week. And then after you have your goal written down, you need to think about why this is important to you. You can use the slider here. So how important is it for you to meet your goal this week? From 0, not important, to 10, very important. Where would you put yourself on that line? And pick a number. And then think about why you chose that number and not a number lower. So what makes this important to you to meet your goal this week for coping? And then think about your confidence. So how confident are you that you can meet your goal? 10, very confident, 0, not confident at all. Where would you put yourself on that line? And pick a number and think about why you're confident that you can meet this goal. Are there any barriers that might get in the way? How can you address those barriers? Okay, so we've thought a bit about this goal and ready to go forward. Hopefully you found this helpful, and then if you try something this week, maybe you could try something else next week, or if you try something and it's helpful, then you can keep using it. I also want to share, there's some other resources that we have on the Missouri Prevention Science Institute website. I have the link there at the end. There's some really good information about shifting to online learning, classroom management in an online format. There are a lot of other videos about stress management for teachers there as well. If you have any questions or want to talk with me more about coping during this time, we're interested in hearing from teachers about what support they could use right now. So feel free to give me a call if you're interested in talking more, or email. You give my email there. I really appreciate you listening, and I hope you have a good rest of the day. Thank you.